Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and welcome to this special episode. Tonight we're going to do a topic called slow burn albums. So the topic of slow burn albums is those albums that we purchased, we didn't like, but over a period of time, we've grown to love. So in the house, we've got Grant Arthur, we've got John Clauser, we've got Reed Little, Ryan Gavalier. How's it going, guys?
Good, how you
Good,
doing?
Peter, how are you
Nice to
doing?
see you.
Absolutely.
Rock and roll, brothers.
Absolutely. All right, so what we'll do is do round robin with one choice, and then we'll go to the second round robin. And if there's any honorable mentions that you want to throw in, we'll take it from there. So how about we start off with Ryan, Grant, John, and Reed, and then back to me, and then we'll go round again. All right. So take it away.
Hi guys. So this was actually really hard for me just because a lot of albums I don't usually hate an album and then end up liking it. There's some that I'm not crazy about, or some that are near the bottom of the catalog by a band that I end up liking more. But the first one that I'm going to talk about is Rubber Soul by the Beatles. So I'm a pretty big fan of the Beatles albums. I go through waves with them just because I've heard all of them so many times where I need to take a break and then I need to put them on, end up loving them like it's the first time I ever heard them. So this one here, I never thought it was a terrible album. I just never fully got into it just because I really liked the Beatles as they got more in narrative type albums like Sgt Pepper or Revolver. I guess kind of Magical Mystery Tour. I've always loved that album. Let It Be, Abbey Road. I just, once they became less of a band of just putting a bunch of singles onto an album, and I always kind of felt like that was what this was. I thought there was some pretty good songs on it, but it just didn't blow me away as much as the others. Over time, though, I've really started to appreciate it a lot more. I'd say it's pretty strong from top to bottom, especially songs like Norwegian Wood, which is absolutely beautiful. You got George on the sitar for that one. You Won't See Me, The Word, Michelle's a real beautiful song. I'm Looking Through You is pretty awesome. In My Life, Run for Your Life, Wait, just a lot of really good stuff on here. There's still some songs that I like less than the others, but I enjoy it pretty much the whole way through. I appreciate how it's a pretty intimate album. It's kind of stripped down and simplistic, but it definitely feels very intimate and personal. It's a good album to get to just kind of relax to, get kind of cozy to and stuff. It's not as weird as some of their later albums, and I really like that weird stuff, but it's definitely a transitional album and super important to their catalog. And I guess I've started to appreciate that more as time has gone on. And it actually has gotten pretty high on my list too over time, just because I think it's an album that I didn't listen to as much for a while. So it's kind of still fresher than some other ones like Let It Be, which I've probably heard about 5 million times. And Abbey Road, although that one's still super fresh to me, even though it was the first album I ever heard by them. It's just, I really like this album a lot. It's grown quite a bit in my opinion. When I first heard it, it was probably a 5 or 6 out of 10. At this point, it's probably a 7.5.
Okay, that's a good choice. I think that album's like a bridging album because there's two parts to their career. You've got the 63 to mid 60s. And I think whether they were starting to associate with Bob Dylan, Smoke Pot, I don't know. I think that album is definitely a bridging album, and their songwriting maturity rise was going out of control. It's actually one of my favorites, that album. No, that's a really good choice. Well done.
So Ryan, is that the American album or is that the UK album that you've got? Because the American album's doesn't have Drive My Car on it. It took a couple of older tracks, but it's more, that album's not quite as rock. The US album's not quite as rocking as
I think it's the
Yeah.
US
Okay, but
version.
I
It
like
is.
the US version better because it's much more like a folk rock kind of,
Mhm.
as opposed to Drive My Car, which, Drive My Car is a great track, don't get me wrong, but I almost like the American version better.
I think I enjoy the American version too. I like the folk aspect. I like that a lot of the songs are softer and um I guess more relaxing, as I said.
Yeah,
It's a really good album for that kind of vibe.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
good
think the
choice. Anyway,
I think to jump on Peter's point about the bridging, I think those when you look at those red and blue greatest hits albums, those would be like the perfect, you know, parts of their career. The
Mhm.
what is it, 62 to 66? I mean, all that stuff, and
Mhm.
then from 67 to 71. And I mean, you can definitely tell it's almost two totally different bands at points. And
Definitely.
it's definitely a good bridge. But yeah, that would be a great example of each side of their career.
Definitely.
Yeah, George Harrison always thought that Rubber Soul and Revolver were kind of like the same record. They're just kind of grouped together.
Hmm.
I could see that in
absolutely.
that
always
middle
how I
period.
thought of them. Yeah, I think Revolver is a lot weirder than Rubber Soul is. For sure, kind of got more into like the psychedelic aspects, but I definitely kind of grouped those two together as albums too. Like they're a fantastic pair to listen to together.
And even when you look at the album cover, it's kind of a psych album cover. Their faces are kind of blurred. So you can
Mhm.
tell that they were really, that's the sort of headspace they were in. They weren't looking the clean cut. Their hair was getting a little bit longer. I just think the arrangements, they really are starting to push the envelope here. And
Mhm.
I think it was fully realized on the Revolver album. But a lot of critics, that's their number one. A lot of critics
Yeah.
poo-pah the Sgt Pepper. They hate it, but they just say Rubber Soul. That's the one. And I'm like you. I thought it was good, but I never rated it or ranked it as highly in the Beatles catalog as I do now. And it's an album that I go back to quite regularly. I've got the stereo version, the mono, and the two versions, the US and the UK, and I dip into it quite regularly. I love it. I love it a lot. That's a great choice. All right, Grant,
Yes.
what have you got?
Well, I'm gonna jump off where Ryan kind of started because this album, because of Rubber Soul, this album came into being. So a little bit of background: when I was in college, I had a roommate that was really into the Beach Boys, and at the time, I'm going, okay. He said, "Really, Grant, you really need to listen to this stuff," and I'm going, okay. You mean Surf and Safari and Fun, Fun, Fun? I mean, nothing wrong with that stuff. Don't get me wrong. Great stuff. But at that time when you're like, I'm going, the Beach Boys, really? Really? So anyway, he said, no, here, listen to this. So he gave me Pet Sounds to listen to. Well, I'm listening, I give it a shot, and I think I bought it. And I really I just didn't get it. Because I was a big Beatles fan, and I just couldn't grasp it, but I kept listening to it. I think, and as it's come to, that's like, now it's like one of my favorite albums of all time, along with Rubber Soul and Revolver. But you have to consider the historical aspect. You look at Sgt. Pepper, nothing had ever been done before Pepper, like the production on Pepper. And Pet Sounds is kind of similar because that album influenced Sgt. Pepper, like the vocal arrangements and the strings, the songwriting. I mean, Pet Sounds has Would It Be Nice on it. You Still Believe in Me is a beautiful song. Waiting for the Day. The only thing that I don't think that should be on Pet Sounds is Sloop John B. I think Capitol made them put that on there for 45. If you could skip that, even though it's great and it fits the whole album in the production aspect, it has a similar tonality. It doesn't fit with the lyrical content of the, young love and being in love and young people and all that crap. But God Only Knows is just freaking beautiful. And Caroline No. I mean, this record just was very influential. I mean, at the time, it didn't sell very much. I think it got to maybe number 10 on the US charts, but I mean, eventually it went platinum. And I think it went 2 times platinum in the UK. But without Pet Sounds, we wouldn't have Sgt Pepper. And we wouldn't have Pet Sounds because of Revolver. So, I mean, Rubber Soul. So it just kind of, everybody was influencing everybody then, you know. I mean, Pet Sounds is considered one of the all-time greatest albums. I don't know what it used to be, like number 2 in the Rolling Stone album ranking at one time. And I don't know, now it's probably Eminem, but God only knows what the hell that would be. But it's, as a piece of work, I mean, it's been very influential to a lot of artists, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
The first big stereo rock record, right?
oh no, it was originally done in mono.
Because
Was it? I
Brian
thought that was
Wilson's-
his whole thing. Was that it was the first big stereo record, which is why the
No.
Beatles did
It only
Sgt.
came,
Pepper.
oh, wait a minute, which one are we talking about?
Pet Sounds.
No, it only came out in mono, and then Capitol
Yeah.
put a duophonic version out because Brian Wilson's deaf in one ear. He only can hear in mono. And so he always did all the Beach Boys mixes in mono. I mean, some of the early stuff came out in mono and stereo, but by this point, Brian Wilson is just totally running the show. And he only wanted it out in mono.
Wow.
If they
Okay.
remixed it for stereo later, but you know. But
Yeah.
considering Brian Wilson was only 23, you know, if you ever listen to like the Pet Sound sessions or the Smile sessions, I mean, he's running the show. It's amazing. The guy was brilliant.
Did he have
It's just-
sand in the studio at that point?
Well, when he had, was that during, I think that was during Smile that he brought in
Yeah.
his sandbox. I
Yeah.
remember one story in one book. I mean, there would be people that would come over and Brian would be sitting there playing piano in the sandbox, and
Yeah.
the dogs would use the sand as a toilet. And they said
Yeah.
it was gross.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
But
I
he,
agree.
go
I
ahead.
agree with that. I used to have an issue with Sloop John B being on that album. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. It's actually one of the ones that goes on my rotation of my favorite album of all time, like albums like Funhouse and by the Stooges, and then this one, Asia by Steely Dan. Like those kind of like are a rotation of my favorite albums of all time. But this one, yeah, Sloop John B, I used to have some issues with. At this point, I kind of find it like darkly humorous and like almost like, I mean, he was doing a lot of psychedelics at that time, and it just seems like he put that
Yeah.
in there, kind of like that one to make you kind of like turn your head, just like, oh, this album's getting kind of weird here.
Yeah.
I think Pet Sounds was pretty much a pot album. When he was starting to do LSD, that was Smile stuff. When he made all the musicians in the studio wear fire hats during the fire sessions and stuff. It's just, you know, hey, it was the 60s, you know.
Yeah.
But if you look back, man, there's some great stuff in 66, 67. It was just unbelievable. The amount of creativity going on in that period.
That God
But-
Only Knows song. That's a magnificent song. It's perfect pop.
And I just think it's funny that I can look at it and go, God, how could you not get into it when you first heard it?
Mm,
But it was a record I just had to listen to over and over. And the more you listen to it, you know, I mean, I could listen to this album and never get tired of it.
yeah.
And I could listen to every Beatles album and say the same thing.
Yep.
You know? But
All right.
you know,
There you go. All right, John, what have you got?
All right, well, I don't really have any fancy show and tell stuff tonight, but this was a tough one for me. I think I had a couple of them that I could think of in my life that I felt this way about. So the first one I'm going to talk about is I'm going to take you back to 1982, and my parents allowed me to do the Columbia House Record Club 11 for a penny deal. So I thought, okay. So I was already influenced by MTV and the radio. So there was a lot of stuff that was coming out. You know, that first 11, I'm thinking of what I got in that first 11, shot. And so forgive me for this, but this was one of them. So I don't know if you can see it, but
Men at
that's a
Work.
little
Yeah,
minute, little bit of
business
men
as
at work.
usual.
I
That's a
love
good
that
Business as
album.
usual. So, of course, I loved Who Can It Be Now, and I loved Down Under. Couldn't stand Be Good Johnny for obvious reasons. But but you know, you love those songs because you saw the videos on MTV and you heard the songs and on the radio. But then you get the album, you know, but when you're 12, 13 years old, you don't get it, you know, not at first. You listen to it for those songs and you skip the rest of the album. And that was me with a lot of those albums from that time period, you know, that I'd gotten. If I took a chance on a band that I'd never heard before, I kind of, and I liked it, and on that first listen, then yeah, I usually listen to it like endless, like Van Halen. Fair Warning was a great example. I'd never heard Van Halen before, but I read about them and I asked for Fair Warning for Christmas one year, and surprisingly, I got it because that was their new album at the time. And I got the album, and as soon as I hit that needle, I was like, okay, boom, I love this album. But with Men at Work, I just didn't. I guess I didn't appreciate it for what it was, and it's only been years later as I've gone back and I can, you know, like I can see it in your eyes. I just think there's this beautiful lyrical harmony about the, you know, the moving on in relationships kind of thing, or Underground. I really kind of like that punchy feel of Underground. You know, the hyperactivity of Greg Ham's voice in Helpless Automaton. You know, People Love to Play with Words is that, you know, with Ron Streichert's writing and guitar playing in that. Touching the Untouchables. I'm like, listen to this song and I'm like, I've heard some of these guitar lines before. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. That sounds a little like something off Paul Stanley's solo album. You know, if you listen to the song, if you have to, it might not be a track you're familiar with. It's the 8th track on the album. But if you listen to the song, there's like these little arpeggio things. And I'm like, hey, that's from like Take Me Away Together as One, I think, from Paul Stanley's solo album. So I don't know. But Down by the Sea, that's a kind of a new wavy, kind of moody, proggy, on and on kind of song. I've just come to really appreciate that album a lot over the years. So I think it actually aged pretty well. I've really come to like that album, and I just wish I wish I got it better when I was 12 or 13, and just instead of just listening to the main hits and then forgetting the rest of the album.
Yeah, they were
And-
phenomenally huge for a couple of years. And it's an interesting case study, like 2 albums and their third, it's sort of really stiffed.
Well, and what the
And
third
those-
album, it's basically just Colin and Greg, and everybody
That's
else pretty much
horrible
left
record.
by that point. You know,
Yeah.
I've never listened to that album, but
I think it's
You're
called
not
Two
missing anything.
Hearts. Is it Two Hearts?
Two
or
Hearts.
It's
something?
very
Yeah.
commercial, very commercial,
Yeah.
very 80s sounding. Like Cargo and the first record, you could take those and just jumble them up. They both have the same kind of tonality, and they're almost like the same record. But
You know, we've done a
third
recent
one's
chat
not
on the
like that.
we've done a recent chat on the Police. Do you see some similarities in the sound, the sonics of Men at Work and the Police, especially
I
his
do.
vocals?
Yeah, I do.
and
Yeah.
and I could certainly, I mean, you have a little bit of reggae touches. I don't think the drummer is quite as,
No.
you know, spectacular as Stuart Copeland, but they're all very competent musicians, and they do good enough with what they need to do for the songs they brought. I thought Ron Streicher was a very talented guitar player. He
Yeah.
filled in what he needed to do. Colin Hay wrote some really, you know, good songs. I really thought his lyrics were very interesting. And Greg Ham, rest in peace. You know, he was a very talented musician as well in his own right, playing keyboards and sax and all kinds of flute and all kinds of things. So, and he was a pretty good vocalist too. So, yeah.
Those
Okay.
videos when those came out were
Oh,
You,
you couldn't get away from them.
You couldn't get away from them. And the thing is that they were funny. I mean, they
Yeah.
were great videos. It was great stuff. Yeah.
I remember back
Yep.
in 1982 in a little town in Montana, me and my friends trying to figure out what in the world a Vegemite sandwich was. Because you couldn't just go to the internet, you couldn't Google it and look it up. So we were like, what is that? What's he talking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Peter, what is a Vegemite sandwich, for crying out loud?
It's yeast and it's very
Oh, it's-
salty and
yeah.
it's like a spread. Do you guys have Marmite? It's like a vegetable
That's a
sort of
UK
spread.
thing.
No.
Yeah, Marmite. Promite? No, it's
Mm.
definitely it's Australian type thing.
Yeah.
But
Grant, have you ever had beef bouillon? Like a
Isn't that
bouillon
just-
cube that
Yeah.
you dissolve in water for broth? That's
Mhm.
exactly what Vegemite tastes like.
Oxo,
Oh.
yeah, sort of, yeah, very, very salty.
Mm.
But I tell you, one Men at Work song that I think is just world class is Overkill. I love that song.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just
That is a good
Isn't that
song.
on
songwriting.
Cargo?
It is.
Yeah.
On the,
yeah, that holds up really well. All right, I didn't expect that. That's
I
good
didn't
choice.
either. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, there you go. Good one.
Yeah.
Reed, what do you got for us?
All right. One more thing on Men at Work. In 1982, my mom, who had absolutely no idea what music I listened to, but she decided they were going to get me some music for Christmas. So she went into the local general store there in Montana and asked them what was popular, and they told her Men at Work. So she got me that album for Christmas. And I'm like a big Dio and Black Sabbath fan, and I got it and I was like, Men at Work. But I remembered the videos, so I listened to it. And you know what? That was my secret pleasure for years. I couldn't tell my friends I was listening to it, but I had Men at Work at home. So that's awesome. All right. So when I thought about the whole concept of the Slow Burn album, that actually started from an interview I read with Jakey Lee, the one-time Ozzy Osbourne guitarist. Now he was in Badlands. He's got a band called Red Dragon Cartel now. And he was talking about Led Zeppelin 3 and how when Led Zeppelin 3 had come out, it didn't do it for him because it was very folky and it just wasn't what he wanted from Led Zeppelin. And this is the thing that I think defines a generational difference. He stuck with an album he didn't like because he didn't have enough money to go buy another album, right? So you're in it now. You've put your money down and you've got this product. You couldn't just go sell it at the used record store. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to keep listening to it, right? And if you keep doing that, sometimes you actually like something. And I think that the Spotify generation, one of the reasons I don't use streaming services is because you lose that connection. If a song comes on and I don't like it, I will never listen to that band again. And why would you? Because you've got 150,000 other bands that you can listen to, right? So why waste time on music that you don't like? But by doing that, you do lose out on these slow burn albums. So I looked through mine and my wife's CD collections. They are different. And discovered that while I have a lot of these, they really fall into two categories. So I chose one from each category. My first slow burn album is going to be Alice in Chains' Facelift. So I remember in 1990 when this album came out, I was driving home from work. I only lived 4 blocks from where I worked and another 4 blocks from a big mall. So the radio came on, they were playing Man in the Box. And I just drove right past my apartment to the mall, went into the record store when you could do this, went up to the guy behind the counter and said, I just heard this song on the radio. And he said it, Alice in Chains, Facelift, right there. Took the CD home with me, put it on, listened to it. Man in the Box was the only song I liked. I was like, oh, well, crap. I'm not made of money, so I couldn't just go buy another CD. So I did other stuff, and I came back that evening, and my roommate was listening to it. And he's like, I don't know where you found this album, but this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. I went, what? Really? Well, let me give it another shot. So I started listening to it again. And I started thinking about, wait, what is it I actually like about music? Now, and I looked up some of the records that came out in 1990. 1990 was a great year for heavy metal. You had Megadeth's Rust in Peace. You had Judas Priest, Painkiller. I'm a big Testament fan. Testament Souls of Black came out. Anthrax's Persistence of Time came out. I was big into thrash bands at the time. So that's kind of where my headspace was at. And Alice in Chains was something completely different. So when you encounter something new, you know, you can either embrace it right away or you can go, don't like that. It's too different. And to begin with, I pushed it away. But then I was like, wait, I love harmony vocals. Nobody besides King's X was doing harmony vocals. And here they've got these wonderful dissonant vocal harmony lines on this album and this really powerful guitar lines. And it wasn't the kind of, you know, fast riffing I was used to from the thrash bands, but it was just as powerful, but left more room for the vocal. But I had to keep listening to it and go, wait, this has really got good guitar work. It's not, you know, it's not, he doesn't sound like Dave Mustaine playing rhythm, but he's a really good guitar player, but in a 1970s kind of way, right? That's the thing about, to me, the best rock in the 90s is the 70s using modern production techniques and equipment. So it really wasn't where I was at, and it took me a while to get into it, but I just kept going back to it and going back to it and going back to it. And I pushed aside Testament and I pushed aside Anthrax, and I just kept listening to Facelift. And by the, I listened to it, I don't know how many times. By the time Dirt came out, I was a confirmed Alice in Chains fan. I was like, yeah, I'm into this band 100%. And it didn't help that they were, at this time, now grunge hadn't hit. There's an argument over who was the first commercially successful grunge band, if you consider Alice in Chains a grunge band, but they were marketed with the heavy metal bands, right? So they were on a tour with Slayer and Anthrax and Megadeth. And then after that, the Clash of the Titans tour, they were just on a tour with Megadeth. And that is not a good match. I saw them open for Ozzy Osbourne, which is closer, but still, you know, they were just kind of, people didn't know how to market them. And I don't think heavy metal fans really embraced that band to begin with. And I've told this story, but I remember them getting nearly, I mean, they didn't get booed off the stage because they weren't that kind of band. They just middle fingers in the air and kept playing. But opening for Ozzy Osbourne, people did not want to listen to those guys. And they just ignored it and kept right on playing. And then that was 2 months before Dirt came out. And then when Dirt came out, they were the biggest band in the world. So heavy metal fans, at least the heavy metal fans I knew, and apparently heavy metal fans in America, did not immediately embrace that album. So it may have been a slow burn album for a lot of people. But now Alice in Chains, absolutely one of my favorite bands. And I credit them with making me want to go back and listen to music from the 70s.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
What year did Dirt come out?
92?
Yeah, I was.
I have to look. It's either 91 or 92.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's a good choice. That's a good choice. And it's definitely had a bit of a crossover audience because, yeah, a lot of metal fans really like that band and like that album. I've been to a lot of metal festivals, Download, etc., and Alice in Chains have been on the same lineup as your Judas Priest and Ghost or whoever's the, you know, the flavor of the month. So they've definitely fallen into that sort of, that category. All right. My sort of slow burn album is an album that's been revered as one of the classic albums, was reviewed very highly, came out in 1977. This band was one of the originals of the CBGB's sort of scene. So you had Patti Smith, you had Talking Heads, and then you had television Marquee Mune.
Okay.
And when I first heard this album, I thought that I should like it a lot more, but I didn't. And I used to listen to the songs, and whether it was the different approach to, it's a guitar album, and the guitar sounds very clean, and there's a lot of sort of intricacies. And then you've got the singing of Richard Verlaine, which is very sort of disaffected, a little bit tonally a little bit off. The penny didn't drop, and I just didn't like it, and I felt really guilty about it because it's one of those albums that it's been written up as being highly influential. You look at a lot of bands through the 80s and the 90s, and they all go back to television, but I didn't like it. It wasn't until 2013 that a mate of mine got me a ticket to see the reunited television play in Sydney, supported by Ed Cooper, ex of the Saints, and, you know, second row. Now, the problem with this lineup was that you had Richard Lloyd had left the band, and they had Johnny Ripp, who was the guitarist. But my God, the penny did drop that night. It was a fantastic concert, and Johnny Ripp did what I'm told, a perfect facsimile imitation of Richard Lloyd, right down to everything. They played this album from start to finish, and it was only after seeing them live that I understood. And it was in that live setting where you saw a lot of the space of the notes, and, you know, a lot of the soloing and the intricacies between the guitars. I think my ears, when I first heard this in the 80s, were very attuned to the sort of the guitar heroes and the distortions and the reverb. The guitar sounds on this album, on this television album, are very clean. And you've got that dueling between Verlaine and Lloyd, and, you know, the yin and the yang, and the call and response. And a lot of it's very dramatic. And, you know, some songs build up to a crescendo and they go down. It's only when you see them in a live setting that you can really appreciate how great this band is. And now I'm like a huge fan. I love it. And I can understand why it's, you know, such a revered album. So I've explored the catalog. The second one, the follow-up, not so good. I've got a couple of Verlaine solo, and that's worth going down a rabbit hole, but this one is a really great album, and it's one of the great guitar albums of all time. And if you guys haven't, you know, viewers haven't checked it out, please check it out. It is really worth doing, and that's my slow burn album.
Yeah, I saw Richard Lloyd play with Matthew Sweet, one of those tours he did, and he was playing guitar for him. Incredible player.
Still got it.
Oh, he's great. This probably was, I don't know, probably in the later 90s. Wasn't a Girlfriend tour. Can't remember. He played on one of the tours with him, because he's on Girlfriend, him and, you know, Quine. But God, great stuff.
Yeah. But I've got to do a shout out. Jimmy Ripp, he does a magnificent version of Lloyd, but I would have loved to seen Lloyd in the band. But, you know, if you can't get 3/4 of the band, that's better than nothing. So
is there Jimmy Ripp have any kind of claim to fame to anything? I've never heard that name before. No,
other than I don't know the background, but he was the one who was playing in that band.
Incredible.
Rightio. Okay, that's my choice. So over to you, Grant.
Well, Ryan goes.
Oh, sorry, Ryan.
No problem. So yeah, as I said before, I mean, it was hard to think of albums that I really did not like on first listen. There's a ton that I like more as time goes on, you know, of all genres. Like, but one that I know I was severely disappointed in when I heard the whole thing the first time. And it was partly because of expectations from one song that I heard off of the album, would be In the Core of the Crimson King by King Crimson. So I first heard 21st Century Schizoid Man probably when I was like 15 or 16. So it's been a little while now. And when I first heard that song, I was just blown away. It was definitely like one of the heaviest non-metal songs and one of the strangest songs that I had heard up to that point. It's kind of like one of my introductions into avant-garde and progressive music. And I was just absolutely blown away. And, you know, I saw this album cover too, which is absolutely brilliant. You know, the artist who made it only made this album cover ever, and he died at like 23 years old, but just such a brilliant piece of art. And, you know, got that gatefold in there and stuff. It's just, it looks like it's going to be like the most amazing album ever. And it looks like it's going to be an album full of 21st century schizoid man type of songs. So I actually put it on, and what I realized is that the entire album after that is extremely mellow. It's weird at times, but it was just mellow, and I'm just like, wow, this is not what I expected at all. And at that time I just really didn't like it, but I knew that I wanted to know more about King Crimson. So I still listened to all their other albums, and I really started to like albums like Lizard and Lark's Tongue and Aspic and Red, Starless and Bible Black. All those albums, I just really, really liked them a lot. And I would go back to this one every once in a while, and I still wasn't liking it very much. I was just like, it's so boring after that first song. And I'd say it was probably about a couple years ago now when this album really started to hit for me. I think it was when I started getting into tons of other progressive rock bands. Like, I've always liked prog, but I went through a period where I was just going completely prog for a while, and was starting to appreciate a lot of different tones of it, some more mellow stuff. And so I went back to this album and I really gave it a fair listen. I read the lyrics, really paid attention to the musicianship on it. And I just realized what a beautiful album it was and how much I was missing out. I mean, 21st Century Schizoid Man is still, I think, one of the greatest openers of all time, especially the way it like starts with a breath of silence. It's just like, and then it goes into that bombastic riff. It's just like, you don't hear things like that often. It's still like one of the most shocking songs I've ever heard. But then you go into I Talk to the Wind, which is just such a beautiful song. It was written by Ian McDonald and Peter Sinfield. We just lost Ian McDonald pretty recently, but the lyrics on that are just so beautiful. The flute playing is great on it. A lot of brilliant mellotron throughout the entire album. But the one song that really started to hit me a lot was Epitaph, which I think is one of Greg Lake's greatest vocal performances of all time. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. And if you really read the lyrics and you listen to them, I mean, even though like it's not something you can directly relate to, I mean, there is certain things that are said throughout it that kind of hit me in certain ways. And it's a melodramatic song for sure, but it's part of the charm of it, and it's just so beautiful. And then you have Moonchild, which is such a weird song. It goes far off the beaten path with that one, and I think that's one that I started to really appreciate too. And then In the Core of the Crimson King is just a really cool song too. I mean, that one's like Mellotron heaven. It just takes you into a completely different world. It's a fantastic ending song to the album. And it's so triumphant in a way, so at this point, I really love this album. It's not my favorite album by King Crimson still. That's always going to be Lark's Tongue and Aspic and Lizard. Those are my two favorites. They probably always will be, but this one's real close to the top now. And it's one that I have no problem recommending. For a while, I would kind of like half-heartedly say, oh yeah, I'd give that one a try, because it was like their debut and I really liked King Crimson, but I was just like, I don't really care for that album. But now I can honestly tell people to listen to it because I understand how historical it was, and I really do love it myself at this point. And then real quick, I'm just going to rattle off a couple of honorable mentions. I'm not going to go into any details. Final Cut by Pink Floyd. By Pink Floyd. Yeah, I love that album. It took a couple listens, but it's brilliant. I think almost just as good as The Wall. 90125 by Yes.
Yep, I like that one.
Yeah, that's a great record.
That's a good record.
Yeah, Maggot Brain by Funkadelic. I love this album to death now. It just took a few listens with all the songs that weren't the title track, but at this point, I think it's brilliant. Super heavy, funky, awesome.
I've seen that in record stores and I've always wanted to pick it up and just, get it, but I haven't. I will one day.
I recommend it.
Yeah.
I have to confess, I have read about King Crimson in guitar magazines for as long as was getting guitar magazines, and I've heard everybody praise King Crimson. I have never listened to King Crimson.
They're not an
once.
easy listen. Ryan's Journey, man, I gotta say, if you can get through Lark's Tongue and Aspic, and yet, according to the King, Crimson King didn't really do it for you, that's not a typical music listener's journey, right? Because Lark's Tongue is a challenging album. And I mean, I dig it, but I think your average pop or rock person is not going to put on that record. It's like listening to John Cage if you're a classical music person, right? Like, oh, this is different. And Robert Fripp is a genuinely strange human being. I love looking up interviews with that guy. His mind does not work in the way my mind works. His train of thought is nearly impossible to follow sometimes. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
absolutely.
Well, John, I think maybe pick up King Crimson Beat and listen to that. That's a little bit more accessible. The Adrian Belew stuff's a little bit more melodic, and Beat's my favorite King Crimson album. Freaking love
It's a
Beat.
good album.
I like this. In fact, that period, that's my favorite period.
John, you
one
got a
play-
homework assignment now.
There you go.
Okay, I'm on
Listen
it.
to Beat and report back.
Okay,
All right. We expect it
I can do that.
next session. Good one. All right, Grant, what do you got?
All right. Everything keeps coming back to Cheap Trick with me. Here's my visual. So we're going to discuss
Wow.
All Shook Up.
Oh,
Okay.
When that came out, 1980? Because I was a big Cheap Trick fan. I think yesterday's discussion had Cheap Trick. I can't seem to get away from it. When this came out, I mean, I thought the first album, In Color, Heaven Tonight, Dream Police, all of those are all 5-star records. When this came out, I heard it and picked it up, and I went, "Oh my God, there's some problems here." It just did not. It was almost like Cheap Trick was a parody of themselves. It has some great tracks, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love it now, but at the time, it was like, oh no, my favorite band. Oh my God, the world is crumbling down around me. But Stop This Game's brilliant. Just Got Back seems like a parody of themselves at the time. Baby Loves to Rock is great. I Love You, Honey, but I Hate Your Friends. That song still kind of makes me kind of, because it just seems like they're trying too hard to sound like Cheap Trick. When everything before just flowed. And, I think if Tom Worman produced this, even though I like the George Martin production on it, I think if Tom Worman had a chance at this, it would have been a lot better. And like I said, I go against Martin Popoff doesn't like Tom Worman, but I think the Tom Worman stuff's just the freaking greatest thing. He knew exactly what to do with them. But now, after time's gone by, I now put this album with that group of records with Heaven Tonight, and it doesn't seem to rub me the wrong way anymore. Like once everything works out, if you let it, was the 45. It should have been on the record. I think it would have made it a lot stronger, but there was it's just, now I love the whole thing. I don't have any issue with it, but this I would say would be the last good Cheap Trick album until you got Cheap Trick 97, in which that album's top notch. But
yeah, that's a good choice.
I think this is Martin Popoff's favorite. I don't get it, but it's no Heaven Tonight. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
This is also the record that I think Rick Nielsen was starting to run out of songs. He probably used up all the ones he had written, because I think all the other albums he'd written all those years ago. And I think by the time they got to this, they're running out of stuff.
Yeah.
But, it's still a great record, don't get me wrong, but it's just not at that high standard that I was used to.
Absolutely.
And it was just a shock. I was just so disappointed when it came out.
Yeah. Interestingly, George Martin did the UFO album, didn't he? No Place to Run around the same time.
About the same time.
Yeah. So he was getting into the just trying to, push the boundaries and try some different things.
Yeah.
That's a good choice.
But it was good. I mean, the Cheap Trick was trying to do a Beatles record. I get it. It's fine.
Well, they're uber fans, aren't they? They're sort of
right.
Yeah.
Any of the British invasion stuff. I mean, they love the move and all that.
Yeah.
But I can see why they would love to work with George Martin.
Absolutely.
With him.
It ticks the box.
I wish they would have went back to having a brain problem. Who produced the first album again?
Jack Douglas.
I wish they would have kept going with Jack Douglas.
Yeah.
Because I think I brought this up that I don't know, one of the chats, that they did like a demo, bunch of demos with Jack Douglas. Such a Good Girl, Take Me, I'm Yours, Oh Boy, I Ain't Got You, You Talk Too Much. There was a whole bunch that they did. If they would have went back and just put those out, it would have been as good as Dream Police or any of those.
Yeah.
So,
I
wish they would even put those out. They should put those out just anyway.
Yeah.
Some of them are like on the box set and they've been released on various, things, but man, to have all those songs on one album, would be great.
No, I think Cheap Trick, they had a great run, didn't they? From self-titled up to that album. I mean, a great strike
perfect
run.
Yeah. Not many bands can say that.
Absolutely. Have you got any?
XTC can say that.
Oh, that's the XTC comment for the day.
Well, got to throw them in.
Got to throw it in. Yeah.
Right.
No, good band. Have you got any honorable mentions? Any?
I do have honorable. God, I can't say it. Back when I was a kid, we used to go out, and there was a neighbor that delivered papers, and we used to. My buddy and I used to ride with him, and he had an 8-track player, and on rotation was the Cars Candy-O, and the first Boston album. Constant rotation. And now I love Candy-O and I love the first Cars album. Love them. I could listen to those constantly and never get tired. But at the time I heard it, I just could not. Back when I was a kid, I listened to Rick Ocasek and it just, I just didn't get it. I thought the songs were okay, but but after riding around, going delivering papers for months with this kid, just got burned into my skull. But I think Candy-O and the first Cars album, those two albums could be interchanged too, just like Men at Work.
Absolutely.
Because they both sound the same. It's just like 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But I love those two records. But
I could say that they had a good run too. Their first 4 or 5, maybe. Yeah. They had a pretty good run.
I picked up Door to Door used not too long ago, and that one always seemed to be questionable, but it actually is not bad. I mean, it's pretty noisy guitar record. It's not quite Carsy, you know what I mean? It's not. But Start Me Up's on there. That's a great song.
Strap Me In.
And it's Strap Me In.
Strap Me In. Yeah.
And there was another single off of that.
You Are the Girl.
I don't know.
I think so, but I've got that album, and it got widely panned, but I think it's aged well. I think it's
aged well.
Yeah, I think the Cars discography has aged well, and a lot of people have said how much they admire the guitar playing, because a lot of people think Cars are synth, but some of the guitar lines in that band are really nifty, and
Elliot Easton was a good player.
Yeah.
He was very well thought out. You could tell that he worked all that out prior to laying it down.
Doesn't
I
get
mean,
the
but-
kudos with the Guitar Heroes. But
He's a big
yeah.
studio guy, right? Played on a lot of other people's stuff too.
I
Big
don't think
country
so.
influence. You don't think so?
I don't think Elliot Easton did. He played with Jules Shear some.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think he was a big studio guy. He's just
Did
a
it-
great player, though.
Did any of you guys get the reunion album? The
Yeah.
that was decent too.
Not bad.
But there were no guitar solos on it.
No.
What the hell?
Mm.
I found that odd. Songs were fine, but it was
Yep.
like, come on, give us some more Elliot Easton.
Yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
Cars never came to Australia, and I was hopeful that they were going to, they got inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I thought they would have a little bit of a burst into a world tour, but nothing, just fizzled, which is quite
Yeah.
disappointing. So can't tick that box. All right, that's great. John, what have you got?
Okay, so this might be a little more predictable coming from me. So now we go to 1987, and some of the albums that were very heavy in my cassette deck at that time were like Slayer, Rain and Blood, or Hell Awaits, Megadeth, Peace Sells. Let's see, I was getting ready to see Cinderella, so probably Night Songs was on the rotation quite a bit. Probably Warlock, True as Steel. Certainly Wasp was getting a lot of play. And then this band came out and that released their album on July 23rd of 1987. Little band called Guns N' Roses with Appetite for Destruction. And to be honest, I just thought at my first listen when they came out, I thought, just sounds like a heavier, sleazier, nastier Aerosmith. And I basically just wrote it off. Took a long time. I think I just kept hearing Welcome to the Jungle and Sweet Child of Mine on the radio and on MTV constantly. And I think I would hear maybe a track or two. And I thought, maybe I need to go back and listen to this. It was probably about a year or so later until I really, because it did take a while for that album to really take off too. But then I started kind of listening to like It's So Easy. And I thought, yeah, I can kind of see myself in this song, or, Out to Get Me. Well, yeah, I could see that too. I kind of like the groove of Paradise City. I thought that was a good song. My Michelle would come to be an important song to me a couple years later. I won't go into that. Of course, Sweet Child of Mine I was like, okay, how you play that intro? Yeah. Okay. You're Crazy. Anything Goes. Rocket Queen would also be a very integral part of my life at the time. Almost a little autobiographical at times, but that the album just really grew on me. And I never got to see the band live, but that album started having a lot of strong memories because I started really relating to a lot of Axl's lyrics in that thing. And I really appreciated Slash's guitar. I just started really liking everything about the band. So now I can't say I listen to the album much now. It's not something I reach for, but that was the only other thing I could think of for a slow burn for me, because that one wasn't as bad as Men at Work, where it took me many, many years. But I do remember that first time listening through the whole album and just writing it off that quickly that I didn't get into it. So that would be my second choice. So the only honorable mention that I can honestly think of, it's another one of those things, you get it for a particular song. And in this case, one of them just happens to be 17 minutes long, and that's why you buy the album, so you can listen to Inagata Davida. but who bothers listening to side one? I didn't until maybe a few years ago. And I'm like, yeah, this is actually a really good album. Who knew? I didn't know. I actually really like, my favorite track from side one is the final song on the side one called "Are You Happy?" It's just this. It's just this really high tempo, punchy song with the organ and and everything that's going on with that thing. And like in the liner notes, like they would tell Ron, the drummer, is like, yeah, we're gonna open up with "Are You Happy?" And he'd be like, yeah, you buggers, because he was like, hey, you got to get so pumped up to be able to, because that's such a fast song. So, but yeah, I just didn't realize the rest of the album was as good as the Inagata Davida, the song itself. So again,
Yeah.
that was my
Have you seen
Well
this?
but
done.
that
The Iron
uh
Butterfly box set on Esoteric.
no,
Ah.
I've actually never
Oh
gone
my
down the
God,
Iron
this thing's
Butterfly
great.
rabbit hole. I
Got
need
like a
to though.
poster, but
Yeah.
it's got like all the records
That's a
Mhm.
good album.
live at the Fillmore.
Is this a new
Mhm.
one, Grant?
Yeah, it just came out probably.
I've heard
Oh, I
Ball is
don't
really
know.
good.
Maybe
Ball
the
and I
last
think
6
Heavy.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
And
got
the
like the
I'd-
mono version and the stereo version, but the mastering on this sounds great.
Yeah.
And the live album, it's got a
I
nice
was gonna say
book.
this version sounds really good too, but yeah.
But
Yeah,
I mean, if you like Iron Butterfly, I mean, they have a lot better albums than Inagata Davida.
I agree.
But
Oh yeah.
this set, it's not. The price is good.
I'll have to look for
it's
that.
A nice box. And I just kind of went right through it, just listened to all the records in order.
Yeah.
Grant, you're
I
turning
actually
into
think
our.
I think they actually get better as they go on, because this
Yeah.
album, I can't remember the name of it, but I'll show you. This record, I really like this record.
That's an awesome
Yeah.
album.
Metamorphosis, great.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
I recommend it.
That looks like
What
a
am
great
I
box
becoming,
set.
Peter? What were you going to say?
I was going to say you're turning into our box set specialist. You always throw out a little box set. Oh, that's great.
I like box sets.
Yeah, I do too, but my wallet doesn't.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm trying to get that. This is going off the subject, but they did put out a Steppenwolf one. Cherry Red did, and you just can't get it. It like came out and sold out or whatever.
Yeah,
And now you
limited
just
edition.
I don't know if they're going to press it again, but I'd love to get that. I guess it's supposed to be phenomenal.
And Record Store Day is just around the corner. I don't know if you guys have seen it, the list, and I'm perusing it and hoping it's like a
Yeah.
lottery, hopefully I get some of the ones I want.
Mhm.
But, John, that's really good selection. And funny thing you should say about Guns N' Roses, because it wasn't only a slow burn album for you, it was a slow burn album for the audience. That album took about a year to go to #1 in the US.
Mhm.
So that took a long, long time. I love that album. I think it's a great debut. I don't think anything that they've done since has been as compelling. And they've
No.
dined
Yeah.
off, and they have dined off that album right till now. So
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
see
I mean,
them
Use Your Illusions has moments, but
make a good single album.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, Appetite for Destruction, it's kind of a weird one for me. As a kid, it was like one of my favorite albums of all time. Then there was like a period in my late teens and early 20s where I just hated that album. I never wanted to hear it again. I was like, I can't stand Axl's voice anymore.
Yeah.
But then there was
Ugh.
like a year ago, I put the album on it again. I was like, holy shit, this is good. Like, it took a while for me to want to hear it again. And I haven't listened to it since. But that last time I heard it, I was like, okay, this album's actually a lot better than I remembered it being.
Yeah. It was a game changer album because you saw a lot of the those hair metal bands that would change their image to listen to the Stones, listen to the Aerosmith, and get a little bit more dirty and gritty, which I think was good. Better songwriting and less show off. So
They took the
yeah.
glam out of hair metal.
Yeah, I think it
I
was.
remember Guns N' Roses, they did a concert on MTV fairly shortly after Appetite for Destruction came out. And I thought it was the worst live show I'd ever seen. I thought Axl sounded horrible. I thought the band played terribly. And that was it. I was like, I'm done with Guns N' Roses. And I didn't listen to that album after that for about 4 years. Long after everyone else had stopped listening to it, I finally got a copy of it and listened to it and went, oh, this is pretty good. But I was never tempted to go see them live because I hated that MTV concert so badly.
Yeah.
I heard a live version of one of their songs on the radio, and it was one of the worst things I ever heard. So I've never wanted to see them live either.
Yeah.
I just can't get past Axl's voice. I can't.
Oh.
It's like, and people always so good. And I'm going, what the hell? He's horrible.
He has
Yeah.
range. That doesn't make him good.
Ugh. Just ugh.
But Grant, take the singing out. Do you think the musicology, if it had a different singer, would you groove
it's
to it a
alright.
bit more? You'd
Yeah.
groove? Yeah.
They're not doing anything different than Aerosmith had already done.
Or the
I mean, they're not
Stones.
doing any. They're not doing anything new. You know. I don't. Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's cool. Reed, what do you got?
All right. So really, I discovered slow burn albums for me really came in two varieties. And that was either the brand new thing that it took me a while to warm to, or the new album from a band that I already liked, but I didn't like this album for whatever reason. So a couple of honorable mentions. The second Badlands album, Voodoo Highway. I loved the first Badlands album. And when this came out, I was like, this is like a swampy blues album. What is this? I don't want this. But I have grown to love it more than their debut. And then may not be able to make this one out, but David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
Yeah.
I'm the rare Bowie fan who I actually, even though I was exposed to him in the 80s, it's his 90s music I like best or liked best for years. And going backwards was very difficult for me because he's had such a different sound. And it took me a long time to reach the point where I could listen to that album and get as much out of it as I did his later music. And I think that's an important theme, right? When you get into a band, kind of establishes what a band is supposed to sound like. And then when you hear something that is not that, it's very challenging. Or at least it is for me. So my second choice, and you won't be able to read the writing on this, I know, but for those of you who recognize the cover, that's the Who's Quadrophenia. So I've said before, I grew up, I didn't start listening to music until the 80s. I was not interested in older bands. I was definitely not interested in bands from the 60s. So even once I started listening to bands from the 70s, and my wife is a big fan of the Who, but I had no interest in the Who at all. And then I actually watched a documentary on the Who, and I thought it was the most fascinating thing ever. So I went back, and my wife has all the albums, so I started listening to them. But I really like Live at Leeds and Previous. Well, I should say, when I was in college, for whatever reason, now I was in college in the late 80s, right? But kids in my college were listening to the Who for some reason. And I can still remember walking down my college dorm room and these kids blasting out Magic Bus. And I just thought, man, that is the worst song I've ever heard. Now I love it. But at the time, I just couldn't stand it, right? It was an affront. So I love Live at Leeds, and I love all the albums that built up to Live at Leeds. But that was like the dividing line. Anything past that, I just couldn't get into it. And I would listen to songs, like I would listen to The Real Me. Yeah, it's a good song, but I'd rather go back and listen to Tommy. And then I had some stuff going on, and I started taking really long walks. And while I was on these long walks, I would listen to music. So that was really the first time that I put on Quadrophenia, track 1, and listened to it all the way through. Pardon me for a sec.
Yeah, I think that's a great album, the old
Oh, it's a
Quadrophenia.
wonderful record.
It's so dark. You
Yep.
know, Pete Townsend has such demons that he puts out through his music. But it's cathartic.
Yep.
And it ends in catharsis.
Mm.
And individually, song by song, I still don't think it's the Who's strongest material. But when taken as an album, as a collection of work, which again is something that I'm going to be the guy who rails against streaming because I don't like streaming. I don't like bouncing around from random song to random song. Taken as an album, listen from front to back. It's an experience.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
And I grew to love it. And now it's my favorite thing that the Who did. And
Amazing.
one of my favorite double albums of all time.
Nice.
Yeah, no, that's a really good selection.
That's a great selection.
Yeah. All right. Very good. All right. For me, Rainbow, Straight Between the Eyes. So I was very much on the Rainbow, the Ronnie James Dio era. And when I got that album, I was a bit disappointed because it was very radio friendly, American orientated rock, Joe Lynn Turner. I didn't like the production. Roger Glover produced it. I found a lot of the material was very foreigner-like. But it's only the last couple of years that I've revisited. And by God, I think Blackmore has got a lot of fire in his belly, the way he's playing. And arguably, along with Perfect Strangers, I think it's got Richie Blackmore's best playing in the 1980s. Death Alley Driver, Eyes of Fire, Mistreated. I think it's an outstanding album. And it's one that I didn't like at the time because Rainbow has got 3 different lineups and their sound evolved because Blackmore wanted to become this commercial band. He wanted his songs to be played in the radio. He wanted people to dance to his songs. So Rainbow Rising, Down to Earth, which was more commercial with Graham Bonnet. And then you had the Joe Lynn Turner with I Surrender and Difficult to Cure. And I think the best out of the 1980s output was definitely Rainbow, Straight Between the Eyes. I think, yeah, as I said, I think Blackmore's playing is really, really good, and probably that and Perfect Strangers has got his best guitar work in the 1980s. Another honorable mention, a band that you guys probably haven't heard of, criminally underrated in the Northern Hemisphere, but hometown heroes, a band called Cold Chisel and Jimmy Barnes fronted band. They were massive in Australia. So you had, I would describe their sound is it's a mixture of boogie, it's a mixture of rock, a little bit of reggae. What I think that was special about this band is they had a lyricist which was world class, which is Don Walker. He was almost like Dylan-esque. You had a guitarist called Ian Moss, who was had also a very good voice. But Jimmy Barnes, I think in that early 80s period, his voice was just really had that beautiful tone. And he was asked to audition for Van Halen. He was, when basically Lee Roth left the band, they rang him and said, did you want to come down and play, sing over 5150? But he said, look, I want to go down and do my solo career. And they got Sammy Hagar in. He was also asked to join Deep Purple when Gillan was out, and just before they got Joe Lynn Turner for that ill-fated stint. But yeah, look, this is definitely an album that's well known around the Australian market, but in the US, never heard of him, and it's definitely well worth looking for. All right, well, there we have it. That was a really good chat, guy. Yep, sorry.
Peter, can you repeat the name of that band, because I actually missed it?
Cold
The
Chisel.
one you were just Cold Chisel. Never
Cold
heard
Chisel,
of it.
yes.
Okay, I will put that on my increasingly long list of things to
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and this album is East, but there's 20th Century, Circus Animals, definitely highly recommended. All right, Well, thanks, guys. That was really good to catch up. I think this was
And I'm just
really
going to add,
enjoyable. Yep.
I'm just going to add real quick, Grant, I've placed my order for Beat.
There you
There you
So
go. I'm
I'll
selling
get it on
records.
I'll get it on Tuesday and I'll start listening to it.
All right.
It never stops, does it? It never stops.
It's like
No,
they
it just
say on
keeps
Sea of
going.
Tranquility, the curse is real.
It is very real.
It is.
I have to say that that Iron Butterfly box set, I am very tempted. I'll be looking at the looking at
I
the
Me
website.
highly
too.
recommend it.
Yeah,
It sounds great.
yeah,
A lot of the esoteric stuff, you know, it's
Yep.
great.
absolutely.
Their packages are top notch.
Absolutely. Well, viewers, put your comments down. Subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us, you know, your slow burn albums. Maybe, yeah, tell us what you think of the Iron Butterfly box set, and we'll catch up real soon. See you guys.
See ya.